Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Chelsea Echo and welcome to your Club World Cup preview. Now, obviously, me and Dan were kind of looking at this and going, what do you even want to talk about? How do you even start with a Club World Cup? So we're going to do the exact opposite and not talk about it for the first 20 minutes. So we thought we'd just get stuck in and look at some other bits as well ahead of the tournament. Obviously, Chelsea have concluded their business in this dramatic first transfer window, which is still ongoing, despite the fact, as of recording, it closed 3 days ago. And of course, you also have lots of other stuff to discuss around Chelsea Football Club. New kits being launched, which actually look absolutely spectacular, which is what me and Dan are no doubt going to talk about. And as well as that, some other stuff which has happened around the club, but also our lives. So, Dan, let's get straight into business. How's your week been?
Yeah, yeah, it's been pretty good. Pretty chilled. I was actually in Nottingham on Tuesday night for no particular reason. Just randomly decided to plot myself in Nottingham, which is I've never actually been Nottingham properly. I've been on the outskirts of Nottingham or kind of been in and out. I've never actually been there for a decent chunk of time, and I was pretty impressed. And but then I it was mainly to see Trev get his England debut, but the rest of the football was pretty shambolic. But I was happy to say I at least the sort of the reward I've taken from it is at least I've been to the county ground now. I can say that I've been there. I found it or the city ground. I found it amazing walking to the ground how close Notts County is to Nottingham Forest. I
Yeah,
had no
I've never
idea.
been, but I know.
I know, but I knew obviously. No, I know like geographically. I know we're talking in the set. No, but I mean like literally, like the stadiums are. I've never seen two stadiums that close together before.
Oh, mate, you've never been to Dundee, have you?
Nah. All
Dundee,
the
I
the
think it's like
Scottish
literally
the
90
Scottish
steps.
Chelsea fans of our audience are fuming right now.
Oh, no, no. I've never been to Dundee. I was saying a few days ago, sort of, I'd really love to do a couple of grounds in Scotland over the next couple of years because my cousins are massive St Mirren fans. So they're a bit like, they said, you need to come see St Mirren. I'm like, yeah, all right, come see St Mirren. So sounds good. I'll do that. Um, but yeah, Scotland's got like, in terms of, if you think those two grounds are close, there's like three or four different teams which are just all so close together that it almost makes no sense whatsoever. Um, but yeah, no, it's they're really close. I've never been to Nottingham myself, actually, but I've always read about it and seen how close they are. It's absolutely mental. I got offered a pair, by the way, for the final game of the season, which I kind of wish I took now, but I didn't. So
It reminds me, and
salary.
this is very ignorant based on like one visit, but there were streets that we walked around on our way to our Airbnb, but it reminded me a little bit of some streets in Brighton, some streets in London, like Carnaby Street, sort of that area, quite artistic. Obviously, it's a very uni town, like that was very clear, very
Mm.
student sort of influence and stuff like that. The weather was nice as well, which of course always makes everywhere look nice. But we went to Hooters before the game. A great place, Hooters, literally, that's not too far, like 10-minute walk away from the ground. And it was just full of like pissed up Chelsea fans. There might be we were Chelsea fans in there, but there was England fans as well. But annoyingly, our food took so long to come, and it was getting to a point where because we didn't get to Nottingham till like 5ish, half 5ish, and the game
Hmm.
obviously kicks off at 7:45, and we drop our stuff at the Airbnb. We go into to Hooters to get some food, and the wings come, and the wings are amazing, right? The food I actually rated. I didn't expect the food, the wings, and I got hot wings. But the problem is, I had to down these wings quite quickly, which was a tactical error on my part.
Oh yeah, no,
So
don't do
it
that
was
at
I
Wings.
part, and then we had to walk, kind of fast walk to the ground. I have to say
Oof.
though, I didn't get the backlash after that I thought I would. My body actually recovered pretty well from it, so I'm quite impressed on that aspect as well, with a few beverages going in there as well, a few beer and Moretti's at the same time. So I have to say it was, but it made for some entertainment because I have to say the football was diabolical.
Yeah, no, I'd put it this way. I didn't even watch it. I've not watched. I've firmly come to the decision of unless I get offered free tickets, um, I am not going to be watching England anything other than the tournaments or crunch games. I just don't care. Like it's just not something which I really see any value in. Um, I think if I was in your shoes, the only reason I'd have gone was because of Trev. But overall, like, it's like England is just. I don't think there's that much joy in watching it, to be honest. Well, there was also not much joy, but something we had to look at and something which was a little bit more hectic was Chelsea's transfer window of 6 days. Do you think that people were maybe overreacted with that? By the way, including you and I, maybe a tad, just a little.
A tad, yes. Like, and I spoke about this extensively in my recent shows, and also like I wrote about it as well. Because like logically, we're recording this on the 13th of June, and um, we cannot firmly assess what this transfer window is going to look like on the 13th of June. But you've got to keep balanced. I'm not someone that, like we always say this, right? I'm not someone that advocates shutting off your brain until the end of the season or the end of a transfer window to then give your opinion. Like that's just
Mm,
boring. That's just dull. Like just that logically, like that's just not how it works. But I think it's having a balance between here are some concerns, valid concerns, and things I think you can criticize based on the evidence we have in front of us right now, whilst also holding space for there's still a long way to go. Things could flip around very quickly. There are some positives. There are things that actually, based on the targets we went for, give me hope that at least maybe this summer we're going in a different direction to the one we were 12 months
mhm,
ago. Um, yeah, there's no point us sitting here and going like I'm not advocating people turn around and say there's no hope. It's we're done. All the positivity of the end of the season is finished. Like no, like I'm not in that boat. I don't want to be in that boat, but I also don't completely disregard, I think, very valid concerns because I think those concerns are not out of thin air. I think they are very precise and specific. They're not
mhm.
talking about Enzo Maresca. They're not talking about the players. They're not talking about conspiracy theories. They are very precisely concerned about this, the sporting directors, concerned about things that we have seen before.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that overall that it's very much a situation where it is history repeating itself in some cases. And then when you turn around and go, why aren't we spending this £25 million on Mike Maignan? People go, oh, well, he's got a year left on his contract. It was completely pointless. Completely understand why they pulled out of it. So, yeah, but okay, then why are we then talking about spending £30 million on James Trafford? Or we spent £25 million on Robert Sanchez? Like, what? They're saying, was it needs to be like they're saying that Mike Maignan will be like the eighth most expensive goalkeeper of all time. Right now, Robert Sanchez is the eighth most expensive goalkeeper of all time. So the standards are like this, right? It's a balancing act, and I look at it and go, the fact that Chelsea weren't willing to budge over £5 to £8 million, yet are willing to then go into the market and sign another young player. So I appreciate the quality that these players have. Like James Trafford at Burnley was spectacular. Like he was fantastic. Don't get me wrong, but it's a case of it's almost like the tick box of right. Is he under 25 years of age? Yep, tick. Is he ex City? Yep, tick. So why are we like? It's some things where it's going. This team right now doesn't need that. Like, and unless James Trafford comes in with heaps of experience, has played a distinctly higher level of football, much like you and I chatted about with Jamie Gittins. We were saying like he's actually played a lot of football for a 21-year-old. So, a slightly different situation in comparison to what we have seen in the past with some other transfers. But James Trafford has had one really good season with Burnley in the Championship. And aside from that, I don't really think has set the world alight. Mike Maignan is a France international, France number one, Milan's number one goalkeeper, captain, proven experience. Like all of these things are tick boxes, in my opinion, right? Tick, 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 tick. But then instead it's going, oh, well, we never wanted him in the first place. It's the same mistakes are happening again where it's these, it, I think you and I said it quite a lot in August last year. It feels like it's insulting Chelsea fans' intelligence. That's how it feels to me.
Mm.
When it goes, oh, well, we didn't want him anyway. So, no, you did. Like, you've literally put out to very reliable sources, that's exactly what you wanted. So, unless you're trying purposefully to make those sources that you put out, like Fabrizio Romano, like Nizar, like other great journalists, if you want to completely disenfranchise them, and whenever you want to report something good, they're going to turn around and go, we're not going to listen to you because who knows what you're going to say next, to basically undermine all their credibility, which is what it does, by the way. People turn around and say, oh, well, look, he's got this wrong again. He's got that wrong again. He's done this wrong again. It undermines the credibility and the integrity of these people, which are actually trying to build careers and are also extremely capable. You look at it and you go, well, why do you do it? Just sometimes, if the ownership and specifically the sporting directors sometimes turn around and went, lads, we messed this up. Really sorry. Which is what other clubs, as you've seen, do. Yeah, people get annoyed at first. But I think in Chelsea's case, because it's never happened before, rather than trying to mollycoddle and sort of just like hold these guys together for making their mistakes, if they went, look, we got it wrong, I actually think Chelsea fans would appreciate that because it would
Or
show a level of
don't say
credibility.
anything. That's also
Yeah,
the alternative. Is I'd rather them not say anything on these issues than what they continuously do, which just it does the opposite effect of what they're trying to do. So very quickly, when the Maignan deal stalls or falls through, we get this Club World Cup tax line that gets thrown out. Um, and within hours, it looks completely stupid because they're clearly then bidding quite substantially for Jamie Gittins. They don't seem to have much restraint in doing that. They don't seem to have or have had much restraint before. As many people, I think, rightly have pointed out, if you look at the dealings of Atletico Madrid, I think it is, for Theo Hernandez from AC Milan for about 23, 24 million.
what a deal
Look at the
that is, by the
business
way. Wow.
that Man City are doing. And, these are clubs that are going to the Club World Cup. So they don't seem to have much issue getting deals over the line or much restraint in themselves. And in specifically the case of Man City, like that's a club that Chelsea should be aiming to compete with. It's not, it's not a club that are in a different stratosphere to Chelsea, shouldn't be in a different stratosphere to Chelsea based on the ambitions I think the club should be having. And it's the mixed messaging. You are not, basic football logic dictates, if you are happy with the options you have, you do not try and sign a new number one. That's
No.
just football 101. Like you don't need to be some great either football economist, football expert working in the media to understand that. So that's the first point. The second point is Tuesday. Funny, this was all going on as I said. I was at the Senegal game, and later in the day, we hear the news about Petrovic not going to the Club World Cup, which undermines what happened earlier in the day because part of the logic being thrown out about Maignan was, well, we're happy with all our goalkeeping options, and one of the names listed was obviously Georgia Petrovic. And I think the logic would have been right that, well, we're not going to get Maignan, but we're going to promote Georgia Petrovic, and then Petrovic is not included in the Club World Cup squad, which we're going to get onto our Club World Cup specific conversation. But you've got to take, even if you don't take the Club World Cup seriously, you have to take these squad selection
Yeah.
decisions seriously because the club internally are taking the Club World Cup seriously. So what that means is if you're not being picked and being taken, unless you are Fofana, for instance, who I know is wanting to have a bit more rehab over his injury, which is completely understandable. If you're not being taken on that plane, I think it kind of says very clearly you have no future at the club. Unless, of course, you're a youngster who's being sent out on loan, like, say, Kendra Paez. But that is definitive. And yeah, it was a day that felt so. Tuesday for me felt like a day ripped straight from last summer. It felt
Hmm.
it felt like I've been transported back to the days of Conor Gallagher being barred from first team facilities, hearing that Trevor Chalobah was not technically good enough to play for Chelsea, despite Maresca never taking a single training session. This was reported before preseason. Um, the the confusing and Rob Pratley I think did a great thread about this, as others have as well, about how it just completely undermines the credibility. And I think that the core question I think I have about the sporting directors, and I hope they prove me wrong over the next few weeks and months, is that I'm not sure they're able to operate at a club where it's not just about signing players for that you can gain a bigger profit for later down the line. um, when you're dealing at a club that supposedly wants to act as the big fish in the market. You know, you Liverpool, right? Liverpool, as we've literally recording this, are agreeing a British transfer record fee for Florian Wirtz. Now, I don't know what the transfer window and the transfer economy is going to look like in 10 years. But based on where we sit now, it's probably unlikely they're going to get that money back. I mean, maybe we go up to 200 million one day. I can't say that for certain. But from where we sit right now, that is a deal that is specifically meant to be an investment for today. They are upgrading a player right now. And that is a club that have at times spent less but gained high value for certain players, have, I think, very accurately looked at data and clearly implemented it to smartly buy players that improve their squad. So it's not like we're talking about, the wild teams who spend mad amounts of money and they're the only ones doing it. And then the smart data clubs over here are spending no money. No, like even Liverpool, right, are now going in the upper echelons of breaking transfer fees because that is the economy, football economy they are living in. They're Premier League champions. They need to compete at the highest level. And my concern with our sporting directors is I don't know if they have the tools, the credibility, the negotiating skills to get these big deals over the line. For whatever you say about Marina Granovskaya, and there are many criticisms to be had about the way,
Mm-hmm.
specifically in her latter years, the squad construction was and all of that. And she was probably asked to do things that really shouldn't have been in her remit anyway. It should have been
Mm-hmm.
having a director of football there once Emanolo left. She was a great negotiator. She was one of the greatest negotiators football has probably ever seen. She was known worldwide for that. And she got big deals over the line pretty consistently. There weren't many. And people will point out ones that didn't get over the line. Fair enough. But compared to our sporting directors right now, she had a pretty impressive hit rate. And that is also a part of it. It's not just identifying the players, it's getting them over the line. You can say that you identified Michael Elise as a great target, but if he hasn't signed for us, I can't judge it as a success on your part. I can't judge players that are not here that do well elsewhere that you once thought was good. It's the Arsene Wenger,
Yeah.
alternative universe Arsenal 11 that he could have had if all these players, you don't get judged for that. You get judged for the players you buy. So
Yeah.
I think that's where we sit. Me and you both, I think, agree. And I think many of us agreed that, like, if Mike Maignan got over the line, rightly, I think a lot of us would be applauding. That
Yeah.
is a serious move. That is a move that looks completely um well, it looks more serious. It looks like the opposite of what we had last summer. And they could still do that deal. I don't know why we can't, after the Club World Cup, go back in for Mike Maignan and just get that deal done. Especially if Petrovic isn't going to be around. If you're selling Petrovic, I think you need to replace him with someone. And I don't think there's a better option out there currently than going out and signing Mike Maignan. That's just my personal opinion.
No, I agree, and I think Mike Maignan, as we're going to talk about him as an example. Obviously, we'll move on to the other transfers. You mentioned Kendra Paez. I do want to talk about that as well. Um, Mike Maignan coming in is an intelligent move because it's a stopgap for quality as well for 3 or 4 years, whilst this Mike Penders lad, which everyone's banging on about, is 6'7", wingspan of an ostrich, like supposed to be like unbelievable player. Um, is bedding himself in, getting himself ready, almost right, doing what Chelsea did with Petr Cech and Thibaut Courtois. That's how I see it. It's a case going, you have an elite number one, a capable pair of hands, and whilst that next capable pair of hands is getting ready, this is the hands that it's going to look at. These are the people it's going to see. If I'm Mike Penders right now, after being told I'm supposed to be one of the greatest talents that's ever going to grace football as a goalkeeper, and I'm watching Robert Sanchez, do you not think I'm sitting there thinking, I could have that. I could take that spot. That's not a problem for me.
Yeah.
It's stuff like that where it's that denial that I just don't appreciate. It's when they said, oh well, like you said, oh apparently we're happy with our goalkeeper because Robert Sanchez saved us 9 points last season. How many points did he give up? How many points did he give away? Because I'm very certain it's a lot more than 9. So it's very much a situation where you sit there and you go, okay, well, guys, like you've said throughout the season that you're not happy with this, or people aren't happy with that, or we're not happy with X, Y, and Z, right? Own it. Just own it. There's not a problem with owning it. If you want to be an elite club, you need to own it. And my My worry, me and my dad were having this discussion, like we said in the season review, it was the Conference League final a watershed moment. Did we finally realise where we're at? I don't think we did. And that's what worries me. Because, again, like you and I can sit here and have this conversation and we can say, oh, well, transfers are different. It is what it is. Like you and I, where you said it's quite boring, where right, let me start again because that makes no sense. Let me get it back. Where you and I maybe differ slightly in terms of transfers, you say, oh, it's a bit boring to sort of wait to judge until the end of the window in terms of like where you want to be and stuff. I sit firmly in that camp. I'm someone who sits there and goes, well, look, like I'm going to watch the window unfold. I'm going to say what I do differently. I'm not like that's the one thing when you and I agree on. Like, it'd be boring just to sit there, especially with what we do, and then go, oh well, it's not going to say anything for 3 months. No. Like we're going to say something. There's stuff to look at. There's stuff to consider, right? So with all that being said, right, Chelsea had a real opportunity, or have one as still as well, to make a difference. Because apparently Mike Magnan's not done. Apparently that's something we're going to go back in for once the Club World Cup's over. Because he's not going to sign a new contract to Milan. Milan obviously don't want to lose any money on him. They've had him for a long time. They're just going to take the book value, and I think that'll be it. So we'll see how that develops. He might still become a Chelsea player because Chelsea do need a goalkeeper. Chelsea also still need, for me, a centre back. Chelsea also still need maybe a striker. Chelsea are looking at wingers. There's a lot that's going to be happening throughout the window, and Jamie Gittins is one which I think will rumble on as well. Obviously, he'll be at the Club World Cup with Dortmund as well. So we'll have to see what happens with that. I want to talk a little bit about Kendra Paez before we move on to the Club World Cup preview, and obviously we're going to talk about other players like Andre Santos in that as well. Kendra Paez apparently is a little bit pissed off, I think we'll say, about the fact that he is not being included in the Club World Cup squad. And he's talking about how maybe he feels that he's uncertain almost of his future at Chelsea, which in itself is a bit nuts, in my opinion. I look at this situation and I see a 16-year-old, 17-year-old who's had the world at his feet for the past 2 years, touted as the next big thing. Chelsea Twitter waxing lyrical about him, obviously being brought to Stamford Bridge to watch the team, all this sort of stuff. And where we talked about to the discredit of the sporting directors, I'm actually going to put them credit in this situation where they've gone, do you know what? We want you to have regular football and grow. And then he's turned around and gone, I'm very annoyed about that. What do you think about the Kendra Paez situation? I know that grammatically doesn't make a lot of sense, but I'm just kind of overall, like, it just seems a little bit odd, does it not?
No, I agree with him going out on loan. I think I agree with sort of your way of thinking that, if you look at all the options that Chelsea are going to have heading into the new season and where he's been and kind of the trajectory, I think the big concern you have with young players is, and it's not just like ones in this situation that you've bought that are then arriving at the club, but also, from your academy, right? You don't want their momentum and development to stall completely, where it's maybe a slight concern of some of our youngsters heading into this year of, say, Josh Achimpom and Tyreek George, of like, what I don't want for them is to be left in a place where, because there's no Conference League football which gives them an easy route to minutes, their minutes completely dry up, because then it's just like a wasted year. I mean, it's a bit like Andre Santos when he went to Nottingham Forest. I mean, what a waste of 6 months, right? And luckily that hasn't done much damage at all. He has, as a very young player, he then the next loan move he made, which was Strasbourg, which is kind of the one you're hopeful is the example that gives, Chelsea the footing, but also, the hope that for Kendra Paez, who is likely going to be going on loan to Strasbourg, will be the place for him, right? He can become a big star there. You're playing under, I think, a very good young coach in Liam Rosenior, who's already proven to not only make a very good team, but, clearly develop these youngsters in a good way and give them a platform in there in their system to thrive and excel. And there's no reason why Paez can't do that. Because the worst thing I think for Kendra Paez is he walks in along with Esteval Willian, and he's lost a bit, and he doesn't have kind of an obvious place in the first team. And then because there's been this online Twitter hype machine that's been going on for about a couple of years now, probably longer than Esteval. We're in September, October, he's barely played, and people are like, oh, what's going on with Kendra Paez? Rather than he's at Strasbourg, he's playing week in, week out. And, at the very least, he is, continuing to develop. So I agree with the decision. I understand maybe from his point of view, he's a little bit frustrated that at least, even if the plan is for him to go on loan post the Club World Cup, maybe just, I think the frustration maybe from him comes, well, at least couldn't I have experienced playing for Chelsea a little bit and working with these players and, working under Maresca to show what I can do in a Chelsea shirt, even if, yeah, I'm going to be going out on loan after this. It gives him a bit of a taste of being in the environment and culturally getting in with the players. And I guess a little bit weird because I think maybe the concern would be whether this is a bad thing or not. What if he turns up the Club World Cup and turns out to be our best player, and then all the loan plans need to be scrapped up? I don't think that's a bad thing, but maybe that is part of the logic. I'm not entirely sure, but I agree with you that Paez, I think for his own development, it probably is better for him to gain also European football experience. That is something that is a slight concern for Esteval as well. Is there is a difference. There is a difference between European and South American football. There just is. Like, you look at the adaptation period for a lot of South American players who've come from that environment, very talented and eventually have been very successful in Europe, but it does take a period of adapting. And I think French football is a great place for that. I think that, Joe Tweeds has brought out for a number of years that if you're trying to identify players that maybe can work in the Premier League, actually probably the closest to the Premier League is French football, like in terms of its physicality, in terms of its intensity, and just its style, its blend of attributes is probably a better fit than say Bundesliga to Premier League, which of course is always kind of I know it's an easy stick to beat, right? But just stylistically, maybe it's a little bit more of a natural fit. So I like it, and I hope for Paez's sake he can be where Andre Santos is in a year's time. Because what would he rather? Like, he stays around at Chelsea, he gets lost in a shuffle along with a load of new signings coming in, where he's not the shiny new toy and he's not the player that is going to be leaned upon. We're in a Champions League campaign where, yeah, sure, he may get some minutes, but he's not at the level where he's going to be walking in and he's suddenly lost, and maybe he looks exposed in certain games, which is not a damning indictment on him as an overall talent. It's just like, I wouldn't be surprised if Esteval has a few games early on where he looks a little bit shell shocked, like, and that's not me like talking him down. It's just like, I would expect that of a young guy walking in, and what you don't want is then people turning around and everyone talking him down and saying it's the end of the world, rather than going to an environment where, let's be honest, the light is not as bright on him at Strasbourg. Most Chelsea fans, let's just be honest, are not watching Strasbourg, are not keeping any attention to what goes on. They may hear about it, but they're not going to be paying much attention to it unless you are someone who's really in the weeds of it, like, and does pay attention to what's going on. So for him, I think that's a good thing.
I agree. And I was a bit disappointed, obviously, when he was saying that he was a bit upset with it and the situation he was in. I was a bit like, oh, hang on, mate. Like, I appreciate you've had this fanfare around you. And I think that's something where maybe Chelsea could have maybe wrapped it up in cotton wool a little bit more, um, and sort of said, look, like, you're going to go on loan. This is the plan. This is what this is, because it's a logical step. But evidently, that's not how they got him into the club. Evidently, they got him into the club by going, you're going to be amazing. You're the best. You're this, you're that. And then obviously that's what sold him across the line. So we'll have to see what happens. I do think a lot of people have kind of gone and sort of jumped the gun a little bit, where they've said, oh, well, evidently he's never going to play for Chelsea. He's just going to be another Angelo. We're just going to buy him, then we're going to sell him. Like, well, hang on. Like, we don't know that. Let's see what happens. Let's see if his loan spell goes well, if he fits in, whatever. But I do think it's the right move. But we should probably move on now, mate, because we are 30 minutes into the pod. and we should probably talk about the most important thing, which obviously everyone is so excited about, and nobody can wait for it in the Club World Cup. Can you tell I'm being sarcastic?
This is the weird thing right now. Is like I'm trying to gauge how people feel about the Club World Cup. Um, I don't know I know obviously like there is a cynical take of all this, and I think there is some validity to it. Not like talking down Chelsea. It's more like just the general feel of this tournament from like a promotional point of view, from
Mhm.
Infantino going on streams and trying to get Ronaldo a transfer to the tournament, and the way I think it was Inter Miami have made their way into the tournament clearly because they have a certain player, and that's the only reason they're in this tournament. Let's just be blunt about it, and probably
Yeah,
also because it's in America. There's a lot of branding opportunities. Blah 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 blah. So it doesn't feel like the height of sporting kind of integrity. Let's be honest, but we're talking
no.
about football here at this point. So I don't know where do you sit with this, because I do think there is some excitement from a purely Chelsea perspective, squad perspective, that I have
Mhm.
about this. Um, whilst also keeping in mind, I'm not going to get that mad if it doesn't go that well for Chelsea.
Yeah. Um, I mean, let's just look at the group straight away. LAFC, Flamengo, and Tunis. I'm just like, yeah, okay, cool. LAFC have replaced Club Leon because I think it was a multi-club model or something that basically they couldn't get in. So already there's a questionable selection in terms of teams coming in there and why they're there. Um, I look at it and I think, yeah, I guess from a squad perspective, I would be excited, but I mean, the only thing I'd be really interested to see is Mike Penders. I think the rest of the squad's pretty self-explanatory. Um, I don't look at it and think there's going to be a massive escalation in terms of excitement. It's more questions I have. Christopher Nkunku included in the squad. Why you're trying to shift him on? Renato Vega was obviously extremely disenfranchised when apparently there was no bomb squad, and there is very clearly a bomb squad that's been left at Stamford Bridge. Renato Vega's included in that. He thought he'd be, playing for Chelsea again, but obviously, what happened in January in terms of him wanting to play centre back and left back, etc., etc. Something again he is now very disenfranchised with. Um, I'm kind of just intrigued more than anything. Obviously, the transfer window opens up again whilst these games are going on. So, should Chelsea progress, which realistically I kind of expect them to do so, um, I'd like to think that for those knockout stages, we're going to see some really exciting players potentially wearing a Chelsea shirt and players which we can look forward to. Obviously, Esteval's someone I'm excited to see as well. I know I've kind of downplayed it a lot. Um, But realistically, look, I don't think this is the height of sporting prowess. I don't look at this and I think it does feel again a bit like it's the World Cup. It's the World Cup at clubs. It is the Club World Cup. That is probably the most Alan Partridge thing I've ever said. It's so blatantly obvious. But it's
It's
literally a
not.
case of
It's not
going,
even that, is it? Because it doesn't have, for all we can quibble about, like the never-ending expansion of the World Cup. The World Cup is still huge. Like it is to many people, it is still the biggest football event, arguably sporting event, um, when it comes around. And
mhm,
obviously with it being international, there's a lot of pride that comes with that. There's a lot of interest that comes with that. There's a lot of emotion that comes with that. And although I am a firmly club over country person, as I'm sure a lot of people are, um, this to me just kind of feels like a glorified kind of amped up pre-season. And that's from a Enzo Maresca point of view, is how I'm looking at it, and kind
yeah,
of wanting to see, because really, because this is going to impact the actual kind of official preseason, which is going to be very short naturally, and it kind of has to be. He kind of, I think, has to use it, or probably will be looking to use it as a way to experiment, and I don't blame him for that. I've spoken to you, name you haven't mentioned yet, which I find a little bit weird because the name that I think that excites most people is Andre Santos. That's the name that I think above and beyond is probably the one that
Yeah,
is the biggest unknown. Not in a bad way. Like I just think in terms of how he looks, because it's not a compared to say we just spoke about Kendra Paez, or Esteban. Obviously, he's not at Chelsea. He will be at Palmeiras, but we get to watch him in this tournament
hmm
before he joins Chelsea. But because he's had such an amazing loan spell, and because he has, very sufficient European football experience, and because he's made it pretty clear he wants to achieve at Chelsea, and I think, is ambitious enough that he's going to compete seriously in this first team squad. The whole look of central midfield, which I think was dying out for more options because it was just basically running Caicedo and Enzo into the ground for most of last season. That excites me, and kind of the dynamic of Andre Santos as a presence in midfield for Chelsea and what it could do for the whole of the team. That does excite me.
yeah,
And because Chelsea are going to be heavily weighted favourites in the first few games, I think the first few games will feel the most pre-season out of any of
hmm
them. Once you get to the knockout rounds, I know CFC Daily is kind of the expert at doing all the potential repercussions and the potential opponents we could face, because I think there is a scenario of us facing like PSG in the first knockout round, and it will get pretty much blockbuster ties post the first few group games. But in the first three games, I have no issues resting Cucurella, resting Caicedo, resting Enzo Fernandez. You put in Mamadou Sarr, you put in Andre Santos, you put in Dario Sugo, you start Liam Delap. You do all the things to give the team a new look, to rest the players that have just come off a really grueling season, but to give the new look to those players that we haven't seen before. Um, I would like to see that in the opening few games. And I think that would give to most people who are maybe a little bit like shrugging their shoulders about the tournament a little bit more intrigue, right? Because
yeah,
my big fear, and it probably is one shared by most people, is the collateral damage that this tournament is going to have on our season,
yeah,
on player fatigue and injury. That's not just a Chelsea problem. That's an every team in this competition
hmm
problem. And that's a wide scale football problem that deserves its own separate podcast that's not just Chelsea based. But that is the big concern. So yeah, it's a 50 at the moment. Like in my optimistic view, it's a 50-50 split between being excited to see these new players, but then also the concern of the collateral damage.
yeah. And I think that's exactly where I'm at. I think those first few games. When I said it's literally like the club, like the World Cup. Obviously, when that comparison is in the group stage, there's two or three games, or two out of three games you don't really care about. It's very much a case of, oh, okay, this is fun. We're playing Algeria. I'm like, okay, great. Like, there's a couple of players there we know, but we should go through them. Or like when we played Tunisia in that opening game of the 2018 World Cup, it was like, okay, cool. We beaten Tunisia, fantastic. Um, it's very much a case of that's how I look at these group stages, and I think that's where the expense will happen. And if CFC Daily is saying we're going to play PSG in the potentially the first knockout round, I think we'll have a longer pre-season somehow. But aside from that, I do think that to give credit to the tournament, right? Because it's going to be every 4 years. I do think that if you look at the Conference League as an example, where it was a tournament where no one really gave it any prestige, it wasn't really something people cared about. To a certain extent, that is still true. But then also, I think when you're in it to win it. And I think you care about it more then. And I think you appreciate it more then. And I think Spurs definitely felt that way, despite the fact they had to pull out of it. I think we felt that way. West Ham felt that way. Aston Villa felt that way. Like, it's now gaining more credibility and cadence in the football conversation, right? And I do think that the Club World Cup will do that. I just think it's going to take a few tournaments to do so. And also not using speed as your main ambassador. I'm not going to lie, but it's probably something I would consider, because I think that's where people like you or I, maybe, despite being in that younger bracket of audience, are now feeling increasingly disenfranchised with it, because it's very much a case of, but we're here for the football. We're not here for someone who, if we're being brutally honest, knows absolutely nothing about football, can't even call tournaments or players by their right names, but has 40 million in an audience. So they're just going to use that to try and make it more, take it to get to be, more of a serious opportunity. And then they're going to use his stream to try and say, oh, we're going to try and get Ronaldo a move to a team in the Club World Cup. It's like, why? Like it then just makes it look like WWE to me. It just makes it look scripted and horrible. And I know you love WWE. I know that's your thing, right? But I'm very much there. Like I'm here for what football is, and I think that's what a lot of
Mm.
people are there for. And I enjoy the short models of the Club World Cup. I think it's in the 10 days, condensed, in, out, sorted, fantastic. And I think you see similar situations as well with Manchester City, and Pep's been very honest about that. I think he's going to experiment as well. He said it's basically pre-season. Families going
Well, it
out, they're
kind of
staying on
it
Palm
has to be,
Beach.
right? It has to be.
Yeah,
Like that's I think that's what it is. I don't think, and to be honest, like if Chelsea win it, amazing, right? And we'll celebrate it, and it's great. We'll have the badge, and I'm sure many people will want to get the badge on the front of their shirt, and there'll be a lot of yeah, just joy, right? Like we would have won a trophy, but I can't seriously sit here and say if, for instance, the first time we play a PSG, right? If let's just say that scenario plays out where we faced them and then we get beaten, in some ways there'll be a bit of relief because I'm like, well, now these players can rest a bit,
yeah,
and we can start to get to the serious stuff. The serious stuff is the Premier League and the Champions League and the season. That will be my kind of feeling about it, and you've had enough games that hopefully gives a level of fitness. Like if I'm thinking about it from a coaching point of view, maybe you're like, well, these players are going to go off on holiday, but at least they've had a level of fitness to keep them going over the off season
yeah,
effectively that they wouldn't have on most years. I mean, I hope that isn't my fear is I'd prefer them to just have all the rest rather than having to go out to play this tournament. Um, but I agree with you on like the conference league sort of like the comparison, right? That yeah, it probably will take a few tournaments and how it looks, how it plays. I mean, the timings from a kickoff point of view are actually pretty favorable. From like, I know I'm very selfish here from like a UK perspective. I think
yeah. I'm looking
Chelsea,
at it now.
it in the tournament, I think Chelsea only have one game that's past 12 o'clock. I think
2 o'clock in the
all of the
morning
other
is
games
finished.
Chelsea, yeah, all of the other games Chelsea are playing are at the least I think 8 o'clock, right? 7, 8, or 9. That's acceptable for a competition that's playing in America. And I'm sure they've sort of figured it out that the biggest football markets, I assume, will be have that favorable time because they want obviously a big audience. If I've got to be blunt right here, I don't know if I'm going to be fully awake for that final that final league game. I've got to say the final group
Do
game.
you want me to be very honest? I'm not going to be awake at all. I'm probably
Well,
going to
that's
be
the
in
thing.
bed.
I'll probably be in bed and I'll wake up and I'll watch it when I wake up like that. And I think a lot of fans will probably have that. And I listen, I have so much sympathy, and it's just side tangent. But when I went to Australia a couple of years ago,
Oh yeah,
you have a new appreciation for how fans who live in that part of the world have to deal with our schedule because it bled into the start of the Pochettino season. So you get to appreciate that 3 o'clock games are kicking off and it's past 12 o'clock at night, and that's literally like that's not even accounting for like your 4 or 5 o'clock UK games. So I appreciate that, but yeah, I just hope that the players come through unscathed. Um, I think once you get to the knockout rounds, if Chelsea get past like the first knockout round, you kind of then want to win it.
yeah,
We've come this way, but listen, the quality of the teams are pretty serious.
yeah,
Bayern Munich, Manchester City, Real Madrid, PSG. You're talking about, and I think that's how the tournament's going to go, right? I don't think many people will expect anything other than probably a very European dominant end to this tournament.
yeah,
I'd be quite shocked if it isn't, unless we go with our very cynical take that the European clubs are not going to take it that seriously, and a few of them are going to get knocked out pretty early and get caught on a bad day. But I think we suspect that if I'd give you a winner right now, Real Madrid would probably win it because Real Madrid win everything. That's kind of my only shout for who I think will probably win it because
yeah,
they're a bit inevitable.
yeah. They're the Thanos of football.
Yeah.
it's very much a case of like, yeah, I think it'll probably be Real Madrid, but obviously you and I will be covering it, as will the score on the final score show, doing all of the games. Uh, we're going to talk to him about the Tunis game because I think he said he wants to cover it, and I'm like, if you do, fair enough, but I'm
Yeah,
not helping you.
yeah,
Um,
fair enough to any of the UK based creators who are covering that game. If you're not out
yeah,
there, fair play. If you're out there, obviously, like fair enough. But if you're not
yeah.
out there and you're staying up till like 4 a.m.,
It's like
that's what I'm just
it's
saying.
like I was speaking to a few of the
Good
lads
luck,
the other
brother.
day. They all just went no. Like if we're there, fine. If we're not, like if we're up for it on the day, we'll probably do it, but we'll think about it. It's not like we're going to be all over it. I'm like, okay, fair enough. Um, but yeah, I think it's gonna be very interesting. This sort of like we'll see what's happening with it. Before we go, we should probably talk a little bit about the squad list because I know you're very excited about that. I know we mentioned some things in brief in passing. Obviously, there are players that aren't going. George Petrovic being a big one. Renato Vega, I think, is probably up there as well. Obviously, Chelsea talking about signing a left back slash centre back. Already got one we signed last year, who's pretty good, but fair enough. Um, how do you feel about this squad? You've mentioned that you're excited to see sort of Andre Santos, and obviously we're excited to see Esteban Willian in a Palmeiras shirt. Um, is there anyone else that really sticks out to you that is maybe less obvious? We could talk about Liam Delap all day, obviously, but we're not going to because we've already spoken about how excited we are to see him at
Mm.
Chelsea. Is there anything you're excited to see that could be done differently by Enzo Maresca?
I'm not entirely sure if like tactically there'll be anything wildly different. The one thing I am slightly excited for is I think it's been slightly overlooked the lack of depth of wingers now in the squad. When natural wingers, I'm talking about, not players that could be sort of like thrown in there in emergency. There's no Mudryk. Sancho's been sent back to Man United, so you've got Pedro Neto, Noni Madueke, and Tyreek George. And I think this is a potentially big opportunity for Tyreek George to get substantial minutes because we know that Enzo Maresca likes to use natural wide players. It's why in the market we're targeting Jamie Gittins. It's why we look at natural wide players. And because Tyreek George was kind of used as an emergency centre forward, but when you look at the centre forward options, we pretty well stacked there for this tournament. Even if one of them goes down with an injury, you've got Liam Delap, Nicholas Jackson, Mark Guiu, Christopher Nkunku, even Cole Palmer can play there. So I think Tyreek George will play more of a natural winger role in this squad. That's why I'm intrigued for. I think hopefully he can kind of. It's a great opportunity for him to kind of establish himself and make himself more than what he was last season. So hopefully he'll take that opportunity if he gets to start. Um, Romeo Lavia, I think, can hopefully get some decent minutes. And as I said earlier, like the new players, Asugo, to see how he impacts the midfield, what he looks like. Can he be a good alternative to give a rest to Moises Caicedo across the course of the season as kind of a defensive holding midfielder? Andre Santos and Enzo Fernandez, how they work as kind of eights attacking midfielders. Josh Achimpom, I'd love to see him play substantial minutes as well. Gusto had to both Malo Gusto and Reece James played international minutes. So I think Josh Achimpom hopefully can gain some minutes there. And to see, like, there are some people who've watched Mamadou Sarr pretty consistently who big him up, who think, he is maybe going to surprise us in terms of his quality. And my hope
Mm,
is that Mamadou Sarr will prove to be. I haven't watched him at Chelsea, so I can't for certain say. But I'd like to think he's going to improve our options. And you may be sat there in a few weeks' time actually going, is it the end of the world if we don't sign a new centre back? That's a dream scenario, obviously. Like that, I'm not
yeah,
saying that's going to happen, but at the very least, he strengthens the options. So I'd say those are the couple of things. As I know with Chelsea, as I know with football, like all the things I'm theorizing, barely any of them happen. And Enzo Maresca plays basically the players he's played all season.
yeah.
The only other side point I want to make is I wonder if during the course of this tournament, Christopher Nkunku will move from one Club World Cup team to another. I know by the rules he can't play for that other Club World Cup team, but because there's a Bayern Munich, for instance, are in this tournament as well, I wonder if during the course of this tournament, Christopher Nkunku will be back in his bags from the Chelsea camp and moving over to another probably lush hotel, 5-star hotel in America. Um, because I can't see his Chelsea future being that long. Like I think we're on limited time with Nkunku, which makes his inclusion and the lack of inclusion of Petrovic seem bizarre. That's why I think a lot of
Yeah,
people are confused about it, because unless we're about to see a 180 that none of us expect on his Chelsea career, and listen, it can happen. Like Marco Correa a couple of years ago was persona non grata at Chelsea Football Club and is now one of the most valued players in the first team squad. So I'm not. Cucurella is the great example of you don't write off players, but I would be really. It's not a case of a player playing consistently and just not playing that well. Nkunku is more than that. He's a player that feels like a bit of an outcast, really, in the current squad.
yeah. Yeah, no, exactly, exactly. And I think Nkunku, yeah, I could see that move happening to Bayern Munich, especially. I saw the links with Arsenal as well, and I'm really hoping that doesn't happen, to be honest. But Nkunku moving mid tournament, I could see. Obviously, Chelsea will have some incomings as well. Dan and I will be covering that, obviously, throughout the Club World Cup. And also, we would like to say as well, if you want to see some Club World Cup previews that aren't just Chelsea related, make sure you head across to the guys at Hooligan Soccer, because they are friends of ours who have been doing a fantastic coverage of the Club World Cup in the mix zones, talking to all the players. So make sure you head across to there. But that has been the Chelsea Echoes preview and transfer roundup for the Club World Cup. If you have enjoyed it and you're watching this on YouTube, please make sure you give us a like and obviously make sure you subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to this or watching it on Spotify, make sure you give us a 5-star review and make sure you follow the feed. And if you just listen to it on other platforms, well, do the same. 5-star review and give us a follow. But I've been Louis,
I've been Dan.
and this has been the Chelsea Echo. We'll see you later.